Art matters, especially as we celebrate LGBTQ History Month. Queer people have always shaped the arts, including in the church, painting murals, singing in choirs, and creating the beauty that surrounds worship.
Yeah, and in this episode, I talk with Libby, a young queer artist who was one of the youngest attendees at the recent LGBTQ pilgrimage in Rome. We explore how she's reclaiming religious imagery through his digital art and making space for queer creativity in faith traditions.
It's a reflection on expression, identity, and the ways art helps us see ourselves reflected in sacred spaces.
Welcome to Whiplash with Maxwell Kuzma,
the show where two queer Catholics, Max and Emma, dive into the dark and twisty Catholic faith we were handed.
and the beautiful mess we're building in its place.
It's a journey of exploration, excavation, and deconstruction.
As we challenge the limited view of God we were taught,
An embrace of fully affirming, expansive Catholic faith.
no topic is off limits and no question is too big or too small.
We're in this together, figuring out how to reconcile our queerness with our Catholicism, and maybe, just maybe, even reimagine them both.
So buckle up, folks. You might experience a little whiplash, but we're here for the ride.
Let's go! As we continue celebrating LGBTQ History Month, we're reminded that our stories are still being written, not just by those who came before us, but by a new generation shaping what inclusion looks like today. Our guest, Libby, was one of the youngest attendees at the recent LGBTQ pilgrimage in Rome. Her presence there was powerful, a reminder of how representation matters, but as she puts it, the door is still open only a crack. There's still a long way to go before the church reflects the full diversity of the body of Christ. This conversation builds on our earlier episode with Dani from And Her Saints, where we talked about how art and spirituality intertwine in queer life. Here, Max and Libby dive deeper into that theme, exploring art as one of the ways queer people claim space and express ourselves. Libby's work draws from Byzantine iconography and the traditions of sacred art, but she also experiments with digital tools like Photoshop to reimagine religious symbolism through a queer lens. Together, they explore how art becomes a language of faith, reclamation, and hope. They're not alone. Similarly, artists like Rio Eden, Mix Zello-Cellos Marchant, and Elliot Barnhill are reimagining queer bodies in the likeness of saints, reshaping divinity in their and our own image, as are artists like Salgu Wismith, platforming queer people of faith in their recently unveiled exhibition Divine Identity in New York City. Wismith builds on the work of artist Gabriel Garcia Roman, who depicts queer and trans people as saints in his Queer Icon series, as well as Kelly Lattimore, who creates saint portraits of key LGBTQ+ figures like Marsha P. Johnson. Artists have also long explored queerness and gender-expansive identity in biblically inspired works. In 1998, Swedish photographer Elizabeth Olsen Wallen staged images of Jesus wearing heels and surrounded by disciples in drag in her 1998 series Ecce Homo. And artist Barry Brandon's First Queer Supper reimagines the scene with gender-expansive apostles. Libby is in good company in terms of queer imaginings of religious and Catholic iconography. You can see some of Libby's work on Instagram at KIBBYER, including a beautiful comic she created about why she's both queer and Catholic. Definitely give her a follow. It's well worth it.
Before we get way too much into it, I'm having a way more informal style today. So do you want to intro yourself a little bit for the podcast listeners and for the viewers, the people who are able to watch the video? Describe a little bit of your background, because from where I am sitting, I see a very cool collage behind you that has a lot of different textures and colors and pictures. And Libby is also wearing a really nice plaid, which fits really well. I feel like that is queer representation right there. So there's a lot happening and I want you to get into it.
My name is Libby Kircher. I'm an artist and designer from the Philadelphia area, currently wrapping up my senior year at Moore College of Art and Design. I have an interest in religious iconography. I'm also a lesbian, butch, and Catholic. And my background behind me for those who are watching is I'm in my bedroom at my parents' house right now. And these are just a lot of posters that I've collected over the years, things that inspire me that I have above my desk. I have kind of like a combination of like some religious art and some graphic design and some just things that I'm interested in. I have Philadelphia Eagles, Go Birds. I have Doubting Thomas, one of my favorite paintings, and just some different prints. And I have Frida Kahlo above me, just things that inspire me.
Do you know that that Doubting Thomas redone? Is it by Rembrandt and it's done with the trans masculine scars? It was a photo
Absolutely,
project. Yeah. I love that one.
Mm-hmm.
What is your favorite period of art history?
Shoot, I think it really depends on what I'm drawing inspiration from at the time. However, I gotta say, like the Byzantine era and Byzantine art, I'm really inspired by. The way that, the figure is represented, specifically like mosaics. I really love, like as somebody interested in iconography, I love like the early Christian iconography and the development of it and how it's really like based on like parables and like the natural world, but it's also brought to like a higher level. I really love like the Byzantine era.
That's so interesting. My favorite period, my parent has a master's in art history. And so like we had like art history books all over the house. And actually growing up, we had a big poster of one of the Degas ballerinas, which I don't know what Degas technically, what he counts as, but what I will say is that I've always really loved Impressionism the most, and not just like the Starry Night, but I think like philosophically or conceptually it always hit me, because like what I really liked about Impressionism was the fact that it's like it was at a time when cameras had been invented, and so all the photorealism style of like the Renaissance and all that stuff, like for so many years, art had been like, okay, we need to be able to photorealistically capture a figure. And especially because a lot of it was like, we're painting rulers and important people. And then Impressionism, like once the camera was invented, and then now it's like, oh, we could do something different. Like, what if we abstracted and like, what are we trying to convey that doesn't rely on just the photorealistic component? Like, what else can we say, like, about the world or about emotion? But it's interesting because of like, with what you are talking about with iconography, it's interesting because there's a very strong spiritual component, right? Like, they say, don't they talk about like writing an icon rather than just like painting it? Like there's meant to be like a spiritual practice inside of it. Isn't that right?
Yes. Yeah. So a lot of that comes from Orthodoxy and Eastern Orthodox Christianity, but it's also brought into Catholicism, in different ways. There's a way that you are supposed to center yourself, and kind of, it's almost like you're like transcribing like a religious figure when like making an icon or doing iconography. I don't do that very traditional. There are like brilliant artists that do. I personally like don't do the like traditional like step-by-step very meditative process, but it's like a whole, like there's a spiritual side. Like it can't be, I think, looked at in the same lens of like other artistic processes, when like there's so much that goes into like the creation, like the writing of an icon.
Are you actually writing icons, or are you more interested in like studying them and making art around and about them? Like, is there a distinction there, or is that not?
Yeah, I'm kind of developing the process of how I want to go about it. I think as I look more into iconography, it's getting more spiritual, kind of in my own way, and I definitely draw inspiration from traditional processes. But I'm also doing digital art. Like my primary medium is Photoshop, and that's going to look very different from like egg tempera and oil.
Yeah.
And so it just looks very different.
Can you say a little bit more about like the materials? Because you just referred to like the eggshell and all that. Like, can you just like describe a little bit of like what was the physical tactile stuff that went into it? And also, can you describe a little bit about like the way that figures were normally represented? Like, we're not are we not seeing like 3-dimensional, or is it more so 2-dimensional, like some of those things?
Yeah, so I'm not an art historian. However, like the way that figures are kind of presented in Byzantine art is that they're like have very 2-dimensional poses. Often that's limited due to the medium, which very often is mosaic, and sometimes is kind of like an egg tempera, like old style of painting. However, like there is a real depth within like capturing like light and hues that come up. And yeah, I love the portraiture that comes out of it and the way that like faces are. Like the eyes are a lot larger. Sometimes the noses and the mouths are a lot smaller, and there seems to be like an emphasis more on like, I don't know, just those facial features, which is very interesting.
Yeah, that is really interesting. And I feel like it's kind of like, it makes me think like, I don't know much about Byzantine art. So while you were explaining, I just Googled a little bit over here. Me and my friend Google, and I'm looking at like all the search results. And, first of all, what strikes me is there's a lot of like gold. Like I think that's kind of maybe what you were saying about light. Like when I look at these, I feel like these are very reflective. I feel like, look, if I were to walk into a church that had like, you know, a big dome and it's all this gold, and then in the center there's this figure with, like, as you say, sort of this almost exaggerated a little bit facial features.
Yes. Yeah.
And then I think what is capturing me with this idea of like the bigger facial features is this expression, the eyes are the window to the soul.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I'm kind of feeling like, I feel like these depictions, I can see the artist trying to speak to something beyond, which I think fits this whole theme of like, icons. Like we are capturing something that is beyond human understanding in a way, like capturing something. And what I find interesting about this style of art is when we see it queered in contemporary examples, where we see like the Doubting Thomas example we talked about earlier, but also like, I really like when, people do, photo projects or digital art or traditional art portraiture in an iconography style where you give queer people halos and things like that. I love that all style of art, because it's like we have there are so many unknown saints. Like we as Catholics we pray the litany of saints and we remember the unknown saints. And I think there are so many people who are LGBTQ who fall into the category. And I think that has something to do with your thesis, if I remember right.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm currently in my senior year of being an illustration major. And as part of my senior year, I'm working on my senior thesis. So I've decided to go ahead and illustrate the biographies of people who I believe should be at least recognized by the Catholic Church, or considered saints, whether that's legitimately or kind of colloquially. So I'm going ahead and I'm illustrating 8, maybe more if I can. But yeah, I'm starting with people like John J. McNeil, who was a gay Jesuit priest who ministered and advocated for LGBTQ people from the 60s until his death in 2015. Sister Bernard Kube, who is a nun from South Africa who advocated for the abolition of apartheid and reproductive rights for Black South African women. And then also people like Cesar Chavez, who is a Mexican-American labor leader from the American Southwest, and was a leader in the Chicano movement who drew a lot from his faith.
That's so cool. And I feel like you also said recently on Instagram something along the lines of like, I'm doing the best work of my life and I can't show anybody yet.
Yeah. So I'm really excited about the work that I'm making. Because I feel like on a personal level, it's also like, a culmination of a lot of the reclamation that I've done as a queer Catholic within the last few years. And also artistically, I'm working with a new style that's really inspired by iconography. But it's like, I don't want to show it until it's all completed. So it's frustrating, but I'm also really excited.
So when you use the word reclamation, can you like unpack that a little bit for everybody?
I feel like when I was younger, I felt a lot of Catholic art was kind of untouchable. And it's sacred, and I feel like it gives the impression that it is. And especially as a queer person and like coming into my queer identity, I feel like these are things that I can't touch, because I will dirty it. And there's so often been religious imagery that is used to harm people, especially with the way that gender is kind of portrayed. So I feel like illustrating people who kind of broke some of those barriers and some of those margins in the style of iconography has like been really significant. However, I also feel like there is a strong history of like reclamation and also subversion in Catholic art history that has kind of perhaps lost that original intention.
Yeah, no, 100%. It definitely makes me think of artists like Michelangelo.
Mm-hmm. The classic.
Yes, I know. It's probably it's just probably too easy with
no, like there's a history we don't talk about with some of these Renaissance painters, or we're talking about it more, thankfully. But
yes, and I actually kind of was going to ask you, like, again, I know that you're not an art historian, but I'm kind of curious, like, about how art went from the Byzantine period into the Renaissance, because like when I think of the Renaissance art period, I know that it was definitely I don't know if dominated is the right word, but the whole thing was patronage, right? Like there was a lot of wealth in churches, in the Catholic Church, and a lot of it went into commissioning these artists, painters, sculptors, etc. I don't know so much about like the works that were happening in the Byzantine period as compared to that. And that might be a little bit too deep for the art history side of it. But if you do know, I am curious.
Yeah, I'm honestly like not 100% sure. I can't, however, talk about the development of kind of religious symbols and how they used and then how they like became.
Yeah.
Yeah. So like, for example, like we have the symbol of the cross in Christianity, which is like the symbol. This is, the easy target for talking about this. And that kind of began as the cross is a symbol of like, it was used for execution. This is a symbol of death and a symbol of punishment. And the way Christians have used that, going back from early Christians, have used that method of death and of torture, and kind of reclaimed it as a symbol of life and rebirth and birth, like of salvation, right? And in a very similar way, I think queer people do the same thing. We take things that have hurt us in the past. I identify as butch. Once upon a time, that was used as a slur against masculine women and trans men. And now I use it as a descriptor and an identifier. In the same way, in a very similar way that Christians now wear the cross, and it's not seen as a symbol of death and torture anymore. It's been reclaimed. And I think perhaps along the way, over the 2,000 years, we may have lost that, or at least it's been dampened by, church policy and the normalization and spread of Christianity, the way in which reclamation has played a huge role in iconography and imagery.
100%. What are some other symbols that stand out to you and like within religious art that I guess you think deserve closer scrutiny, like the cross?
Yeah, I think there's this really great tradition from the medieval era that I think needs a revival, of people showing the side wound of Christ as kind of being a symbol of a vulva or a vagina.
Fertility.
Which is very interesting. Fertility, yeah. It's become like this yonic as opposed to phallic like symbol that also symbolizes like birth and rebirth. I think like my favorite depictions of this side wound come from St. Catherine of Siena, who had like ecstatic visions where she was drinking from the side wound, right? And there's something to get into there, that is very queer. So I think there is a like queering and breaking of the traditional gender that we see Jesus as, like within his side wound. It's a, traditional feminine act to birth. Jesus has birthed the salvation, Yeah. So there's this really like amazing way in which very often women connected with Christ. And there's also like, I don't know if you know about this, but this is something I've heard from my grandmother, that they used to tell women, at least like that my grandmother told me about, when they were giving birth, going through contractions, to meditate and focus on the pain of Christ on the cross, because the pain that he felt was contraction birth pains.
Interesting.
He was birthing, a new era of salvation and like the covenant of God with mankind. So the pain he was experiencing on the cross was not the physical pain of being nailed by the hands and the feet, but it was a like birthing pains, right? And that's very interesting to imagine and to think about. And it's very queer and it's very subversive. And I think that was an amazing way that a lot of women connected with Christ, No,
totally. And I think what you're touching on there I don't know if the right word is accessibility, like the accessibility of art or the accessibility of the symbols or even the storyline of salvation itself, of like, especially because in the medieval period, which I think is where a lot of some of the most interesting histories of saints and also some of these like artistic representations or understandings, like some of those things come from. It was a time of great inequality in society, because you had the kings who were just completely divorced from the normal everyday agricultural life of the vast population. And then you had all these so basically what I'm trying to say is like people try to rewrite history, and it's this idea that this traditional family has always existed, the traditional straight family, the trad wife thing. But it's like, we actually know from history, from a time when the vast population was like agricultural, they were the ones who were coming up with some of the most unhinged by modern standards, like concepts of spirituality. Like, you know what I mean?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, like what you mentioned about the traditional family in a way that I have a very hard time contextualizing the present with the past in that way, because there is, like, in modern Catholicism, a really big emphasis on the family. Especially, like, I feel like it's been kind of a reactionary stance, especially with, like, the church's ruling on contraception and abortion and family planning.
That's well said.
Yes, like, it's very interesting to think about that within Catholic history when there is such an emphasis on monastic and community living and also celibacy. And I feel like those models of living, like monasticism and celibacy, have also kind of been, I don't want to say a refuge, it's been kind of a place where a lot of LGBTQ people went back in the day, and still in this day, you know?
Like a safe haven, or even like a liminal thing, right? Like if I can't be like out and proud and who I am, I can go into this place that's kind of in between in the spiritual world where there's a way to integrate it, but I just quite don't know what it is maybe yet.
Yes. And I feel like that kind of gave birth to a lot of really fascinating ways to look at spirituality. There's one person that I want to bring up who I believe is actually a venerated saint in Eastern Orthodox traditions, and in Melkite Christianity, I believe, is Saint Marino, or Saint Marina the monk. Yes. Who is by modern accounts can be interpreted, but also, you know, history does not have the same standards and definitions as binaries that we have, you know, created to describe ourselves in the 21st century. So Saint Marino was a raised female, however, has chosen to live as a monk, changed her name from Marina to Marino, and dressed and presented as male with his daughter in a monastery in modern day Lebanon.
So
and I
cool.
I feel like there's definitely plenty of other stories of this occurring and this happening. I mean, just personally, the first career that like I ever wanted was a nun. I wanted to be a nun, like, I think from probably the age of 6 or 7. Like, I felt, and it was a way that I was like, I don't have to marry a man because I know I don't want to do that. And I can just have sleepovers with my friends like all day. And I was very religious, like, growing up. I lost it in high school and then kind of gained it back. But you know, where that was kind of like a refuge of like, well, this is how I feel, and this is the closest option for me because I did not have, you know, LGBTQ language as a 7-year-old.
100%. And yeah, I have told this story before, but I think often, because as a transgender person, everybody is always like, so when was the first time that you knew? And I'm like, okay, like as a side note, I just feel that fixating on that like, that's not the narrative that is really like helpful. Like, but I think cis people, have this fascination with that narrative because they have not examined their gender. So it's like, they want to understand like how this recognition of discordance or difference, dysphoria, whatever this, some people say bentness, you know, the not clicking. They want to understand how that manifests. But it's funny because at the same time, they don't want to understand too much, which I really feel like is a theme where it's like we are fascinated by difference so often, but then we kind of back off because if we look too closely, then a lot of things. We start to have questions about a lot of things, not just about ourselves, but like, well, why is it this way? Like, why has this always been the dominant narrative? I really appreciate talking with you, Libby. Like, I really like how your brain works, and I feel like my brain is clicking and picking up with what you're doing. So it's really, it's not just the satisfaction that comes from talking to queer Catholics. It's the extra thing where it's like, oh, we have like enough similar interests. Like, I am not really like a traditional artist or a digital artist, or like, strictly speaking, I have done it before, but like, I've done enough that like everything you're saying is really resonating with me. So I'm really enjoying this conversation.
I'm so glad, because sometimes like you said, like my brain will click and I'm like, I don't know what I'm going on. Like, I don't know what I'm thinking. So I'm really glad that like it resonates with you and it resonates with people.
Yes. And what I wanted to say about the narrative and the storyline, because specifically what you had said was that you didn't really have language about like, and I was thinking about how my story is that when I was in daycare growing up, at nap time, they would always hand out pink blankets or blue blankets, and I like demanded a blue blanket. And now, yes, this goes with my blue supremacy. I do love blue.
Good color.
But I also think that it was definitely a communication thing. Like, I was saying, I belong on the boys' side. Like, it's not that these colors are inherently gendered, because that's the whole other thing, which I find problematic with the storylines, because like, so often it's sifting through stereotypes. But the problem is as well that like, when it comes to like, trans people are not, just like any group of people. It's not like every trans person is a stereotype of their gender. Like, yes, not every trans man will have stereotypically masculine interests. I mean, even me, like, I am pretty freaking binary man. Like, I have thought about it a lot. I've explored the edges of gender for myself. Like, even if I painted my nails, which I did, like, after I had top surgery, I painted my nails, and I did like photos for myself that were just me with the nails and with the top surgery. Cause I was like, how does it feel? Like, I know that painting my nails is not inherently gendered, but like, how do I feel about it? Do you know what I mean? Yeah. And I guess I'm bringing this up as well, because this is kind of like, to me, that was like, an art project that was like as part of processing of gender in a way. But I guess the main point that I'm making is just that, I know that, we are not bound to stereotypes. And I know that my story of nap time wasn't just about, stereotypes. It's not like, you know what I mean? It was really, it was really the thing that you said, which was, I didn't have a way to communicate this, to the adults in my life. And part of that too is like, because we were literally children. Like, to be fair, even in the most, even in the most welcoming, like, environment, it's still going to be like, I am a child and I don't necessarily like 1 + 1 = 2. Like I'm not like that far in terms of like my developmental ability to articulate an identity, but I was signaling, hey, I belong over here. I want to do these things. So that was a very long-winded story, but I just feel like that's an important point about like, the language that we don't have access to. And then maybe like part 2 is, so then we develop interests, and then those interests become ways for us to express those identities, which I feel like that's the you exploring now, like, because I know how we had talked before about, despite being raised Catholic, you kind of had a period of atheism. And I know and I think that speaks to the reclamation piece for you.
Yeah, I feel like going through a period of atheism and then kind of coming back as a queer Catholic is like so, I don't want to say universal because everybody's different, but I feel like it is so, so common. And I feel like it was really important. So when I was very atheist in high school, I created a lot of religious art that was angry. I created a lot of like angry, subversive art. And it was a way to process that. And it was a way to use the language that hurt me. And I tried to hurt God, and I tried to hurt the Catholic Church with that same language, right? So it was kind of like a reflection, like, I don't know, deflection of like the things that have hurt me. So like I drew, I don't know, I just drew very cold and detached, like, religious figures, without, like, a lot of the warmth and a lot of the humanness that they have.
You were depicting them how they felt to you, so they felt cold and detached.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I drew, like, candles melting and, just a lot of anger, and I felt like I needed to do that, for that time. And that was how I needed to express myself before I could get to a point where I became very comfortable with my religion and spirituality. And, this was, a therapeutic process for myself, but also a religious process of, coming back with the conviction of like, there is a God and that God loves me. And it was man that hated me. Right.
100%. This is when I want to ask you, because I know that you started to go to Dignity events. And so Dignity is the oldest. I'm a board member with Dignity as well. I always have to disclaimer. It is the oldest LGBTQ Catholic organization in the US. And it's also a group that now, it was began around the time of the Stonewall riots, around the time. And it is now has older membership as well. So it's been around for a really long time, has a beautiful, rich history. It's deeply fascinating. The people that you will meet in Dignity and the lives that they've lived, like, I can't think of any other LGBTQ space where there's such a diverse group of people and diverse group of experiences. And also, honestly, like, there's a very ecumenical spirit in Dignity as well that I think really speaks to me as well, because it's like, so many queer people have had many different types of experiences of faith. Like, they may have been born into one, tried different ones, come back to Catholicism, or maybe kind of like borderline, like, I want to be connected to the Catholicism, to the good things of Catholicism that I grew up in, but I go to a Presbyterian church now, for example. But all that to say, I keep getting, Libby, on these like long, detailed contextualizing tangents.
You're so good.
But I was kind of wanting to set it up for you, being a part of Dignity and as a young person and going to the Jubilee in Rome, the Jubilee, and also being the youngest person there. I think that we want to talk about that, but also I'm also wanting to, like, I'm curious for you because, like, I mean, it doesn't get more Catholic in terms of like all the history and all the art history and all the depictions, like, than physically being there. So I'm kind of curious if you can take us through both of those things. Like, what was it like going there? I assume that was the first time you've been to Rome. Like when you saw the way things were depicted in art there, like how those things felt, as simultaneously you're the youngest person as part of this Jubilee and you're seeing the elders who were like denied for so long to be able to have celebrations. Like, holding all of those things together, which I realize is a lot to do, but that was my question.
Yeah, I can kind of, try and walk through that again of what that experience was like. So I did go to the first ever LGBTQ Jubilee pilgrimage back in early September, which was, I gotta say, like, I'm 21 years old. I don't have as much life experience as, people older than me, but it has been like the most profound experience of my life. It was incredibly profound and incredibly beautiful, and I'm still kind of reeling from it,
Totally.
like 2 months later.
Yeah.
And yeah, so this was not actually the first time I've been to Rome.
Oh, that's even more interesting then.
So I went 2 years ago, a part of a study abroad program with my college. I took a drawing class in Rome, and I was very lucky to be able to do that. It was fantastic. It was my first time outside of the continent, right? I've only been to Canada before this. And, it was an amazing experience. I was there for 3 weeks in January, so it was a lot shorter. And that is when I first went and I saw all of the art that was there.
And how did that all hit you?
It was crazy. It was, I went at a time when I was really struggling with my faith and also with my mental health. This was like 2 years ago. And at this point, I was like, I'm not Catholic. I'm Christian. I'm not Catholic. I'm trying out different denominations. I felt kind of okay with being Episcopal at that point, Episcopalian. So it was a mixture of, this is something that is so important to me for my family and my childhood, right? Because I went twice to St. Peter's. We only had to go once for our class, but I went twice on my day off. Yeah. And also being upset and overwhelmed and looking at it with a critical lens, which I think is also very important, not just for people who are Catholic, and not just for people who aren't Catholic. Like you should be critical of is some things within the church. Use your discernment and personal conscience. That is a part of Catholic social teaching.
Absolutely.
So that was like very overwhelming. And I was like I don't know, there were some other like cradle Catholics within like the group that I was with, but I was the only person that was like still Christian. So it was very overwhelming. And everybody was like, Libby, are you okay? Like, what's going on? But it was great. And I went and I actually got communion at St. Peter's Basilica the second time that I went. And that was a really significant moment. And I cried,
Yeah.
And that was fantastic. Yeah.
Was that like in a time of uncertainty, overwhelm, in betweenness? Do you feel like that time of receiving communion for you was like a moment of, I know all of the hurt that I have experienced, but I also feel that this is my tradition. I was baptized into this church, and this is a reclaiming moment for me. Did you feel that way?
Yes. I did. I felt that way personally, but I didn't feel that way externally. Very purposefully, when I went to St. Peter's, I dressed the straightest that I could.
Oh, I see. Okay. Yeah.
And it, I had longer hair, and
no plaid.
I dressed as straight as that I could. And because I did not want to be hurt again, and I did not want to get side eyes in this place. Yeah. So I felt that personally, I got communion as a queer person. This is a sacrament that is so often denied to queer people. But the priest didn't know that. The other people in this place did not know that, so that was one thing. It I thought of, there's a very particular CCD teacher that hurt me very deeply when I was in middle school, and I thought of her, and I also thought of my grandparents who have come to really love and accept me as queer, who are very, very Catholic. And I've also thought of those in my family who would want to be at, come to the Vatican, but cannot be there, right? So it was like a very emotional moment where I thought both of myself and then the forces that brought me there and the forces that have shaped me and brought me to that moment. And
so that's a huge contrast then to the Jubilee.
Yes, yeah. Because in contrast, going to the Jubilee, I was out as queer, right? I looked very queer. I'm with all these gay people with rainbows who are with their partners, who are presenting as the gender and gender presentation that they want to, that is them. And it was, I received communion at the Church of the Jesu in the center of Rome, and the priest knew I was gay, right?
Not hiding.
So, not hiding, not trying to protect or preserve myself in any way. So that was like a 180 from the experience that I had 2 years ago.
And when you had a very powerful personal experience of being able to reclaim faith as a young queer person, knowing the harms perpetrated by the church to queer people and, in general. How was it like for you in that moment, in that experience, also seeing the older people? Like, what was it like seeing all of these people who, and many of them who there were a number who were there with you who had been in Rome when World Pride happened, and Pope John Paul was the Pope, and it was not at all welcoming. They complete opposite 25 years ago versus, and so many people feeling that sting from then having their own maybe redemptive moment. Like, what was it like to see that?
I felt incredibly privileged and grateful that I was able to experience this Jubilee with people older than me. I was the youngest from the Dignity contingent. I was one of the youngest in the pilgrimage overall. There are also people in their early 20s, but I have not met anybody younger than I. So I felt incredibly blessed and privileged to be able to experience this with people who have fought this fight for decades and some for lifetimes, to be able to walk through these doors and to be able to not hide themselves in a place where that represents a God that has created them, and a God that knows their true name. When the people have not been able to until then, it was a privilege to see people, and to experience this with people. There's a lot of tears, of course. And for a lot of people, this felt like this is something I've reflected on, about how this pilgrimage feels in a linear sense. Because there's a lot of talk about the linearity. I don't know if that's a word.
I'm following. I like it if it's not. I want it to be a word.
Yes, yeah. Of this moment as it stands both in church history and LGBTQ history, for a lot of people, particularly older than me, who are, into their seniorhood, this feels like a ending place. This feels like a moment that
the end of a chapter.
The end of a chapter. It's like something that they have gotten to. So it's like they have fought to open the door, and now they're walking through it.
Yeah.
Well, for me, what that has felt like, if I want to place this, again, like in a linear kind of pattern of thinking. This has felt like a genesis, like a starting place for me personally, right? The door, quite honestly, the door is not open. It is not open as much as it needs to be. It's open a crack enough for some people to squeeze through, right? But I have, since this pilgrimage, there's a conviction that I have to open this door wide enough for everybody to get in, right? And I feel like this is more of a starting point for me of I am seeing what is possible, and I want to get to a place where of that possibility, right? And I'm so, so grateful for the people that helped to open the door crack, but I want to open it up more, especially for the transgender, non-binary, and intersex people in our community, and for people of color, and for people who are, for women, right? In a church that is so patriarchal, I want the door to be open more, and I feel like it feels in a way like I'm not placing myself in any position of like importance, but it feels kind of like a relay race of, right, like somebody, you tag the other person in and the other person starts running, where I felt like a lot of the older people, they are seeing the culmination of their life's work, and I'm seeing what is possible for the future.
I love that. I love that a lot, because it's so easy as young people. So I'm 34, so not quite as young, but still young. I'm a millennial as well. So pretty much the boomers have thought for years that we're still high school students. Like it's the millennial. There's so many millennialisms that we could just go off of, but specifically I was thinking about being young and how, and honestly, not even being young. People of all ages right now, I think, are just feeling like this is a very intense, stressful moment of uncertainty, And I don't just mean about the church or the LGBTQ pilgrimage. I just mean in general. Yeah. It's a time when there just are a lot of uncertainties, like almost in every category of life, especially, for LGBTQ people, for minorities, for people who are extra vulnerable, but really for everybody. It's true. But what I really liked about what you said is, I think it's so easy to be in a time of uncertainty, and for that to make you feel less wanting to be connecting, less wanting to be in a relay race. You just want to race for yourself. You just want to protect yourself. And so I feel like it's really significant and really important that you are illustrating that dynamic, that you're pulling out that dynamic, because I think that way of thinking of how do I see myself as part of like the ongoing tapestry, the ongoing thread of like how the gospel is being lived, like in present tense, I just think that's so important, because like it's a way that it's like none of us, well, first of all, it's not just about any one of us, and then also like, if it's not just about me, then I don't have to bear the weight of being the hero of the whole story for everybody. Because if it is a relay race, then we can work together. Then you as a younger member can hold the support, honor the legacies, and build forward. Like the way we all fit together is what I'm really feeling from what you said.
Yeah, I think as you were talking, I thought of this quote. I thought, I'm probably not quoting directly, from Leslie Feinberg, who I find to be very inspirational, of fighting for something may kill you, but not fighting for anything absolutely will. Of there needs to be community in times like this, and there needs to be a connection to something greater. Because nobody can survive on their own. and I'm talking about survival very literally. Like, in times like this in the United States, like, this is very literal life and death that we could potentially be talking about, and it was life and death for the older members in the 1980s and the 1970s and the 1960s, right? It was the community that kept people alive, right?
Yes.
And I feel like the church community and Catholicism and really any religion, if I'm being honest, has this life-giving community force very often, that, there's a source of hope. There's like a wellspring of hope, that can arise out of these religious communities. And I, of course, relate to as a marginalized person, and find a lot of inspiration from faith communities that are marginalized and have faced marginalization. I am a really huge subscriber to liberation theology, and I believe very deeply, like, I consider it a fact, other than a theory, of God's preferential option for the poor, God's preferential option for the marginalized.
Yes.
Why did God choose to become incarnate as a, Jewish man living in Palestine under Roman occupation?
Brown-skinned Jesus.
Yeah, it's like, why did God choose to become incarnate as this person with this identity, right? Because God has this preferation for the abundance and success of marginalized people.
Absolutely.
And that is something that keeps me going when the odds are against us, right? And I see Christ in every person truly, but I see Christ especially among those who are having suffering inflicted upon them. I think I'm going on a little bit of a preachy tangent right now.
No, but, I love it because I love it because I love that came out of what you were saying about Leslie. And I kind of want you, even though we're kind of nearing the end here of our conversation in terms of like our recording time, I don't want to like open a can of worms, but like at the same time, my brain is a can of worms that's always overflowing.
Mine too. Yeah.
And that's why we get along, Libby. I think we're kind of on the same page with that.
I see it. Yeah.
But specifically about Leslie, I like that's where your brain went, because I was thinking as you were talking about that, about what you've said before about looking up to Leslie and the reclamation of the word butch as well. So would you mind saying a little bit, like sharing with people who Leslie was and who Leslie was to you, and in your research and your reading and the significance with those terms?
Yeah, so Leslie Feinberg was a butch activist and also writer and scholar. Icon also as well, let's be honest. That really did a lot of work and a lot of introspection into the butch and trans masc identity.
Yeah.
And
like
really,
a pioneer.
Really a pioneer, yeah. And I really resonate with Leslie. And I read Stonebush Blues, which is like her, like, seminal novel, right? And like, he's really fantastic at like describing the butch experience, and then because the novel is really like a semi-autobiographical work, and kind of explaining that identity, not explaining, but portraying, truthfully. And I find a lot of inspiration from Leslie.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. Just
no, totally.
I'm like looking at my copy of Stonebush Blues on the shelf right now. But yeah.
Yeah, 100%. Because, and I think it's important and relevant here because what I really like about trans masculine identity and butch identity, because like, so for me, I didn't start my actual transition until I was 28, I think. Which is such a weird time to start transitioning, like in so many ways. Like it was a weird thing, but like for me, the reason for me is that because being born in the conservative Catholic bubble and then living in it for all those years, I like basically went as far as I could go with the script that they told me I was allowed to play.
Yeah.
And then finally I ran out of like runway, because eventually it was, okay, you did all this, but you're still a woman and we still expect you to do what women do, which is to get settled down and all that stuff, like marry a man and have a family. Like that is ultimately what we expect from you. No ifs, ands, or buts. You can take a detour, you can take the scenic route, but you still have to get there at the end. Yeah. And that's kind of, I think, like an interesting thing about women's like gender roles in general, because like, and I think about this all the time about how, when it comes kind of back to this idea of the stereotypes, when it comes to what behavior is allowed, like in terms of policing, when parents or authorities police gender, I guess, young girls are allowed to be like tomboys. In a way that is not equal for little boys, because if little boys try to do anything feminine, that is like policed in an entirely different way, like much more immediately a problem if a little boy is interested in the feminine. Anyway, all that to say, again, here I go with my long detailed but specifically, like for me, so there were many years of I'm trying to follow the script as best I can. Like I'm trying to find a place for me within this system. And so the concept of trans masculine identity, butch identity, was something I circled around and around and around, because I was like, there is so much power in the butch identity and the butch expression of gender. There is so much power in a woman who says, I represent myself through these masculine things, not just because like now women are equal and we're allowed to wear pants, but like these are the things that feel right to me. Being able to wear a button up and a tie, even cis lesbians who feel more comfortable with top surgery. Like I know what feels right. Like I want to play the masculine role. Like it was so beautiful to me in so many ways, especially because, I mean, women are just amazing in general. So like women doing things is just like, so like not in like I'm attracted to all women. I am attracted to women, but like I just love the inner world and the life of women. Like there's so much that women have to contribute. And that is something I've really tried to carry with me. This is again, another sidebar, but that's really something I've tried to carry with me in my transition is how do I, as a man now, support and amplify the voices of women, because like I know what it's like to have been in all of these rooms where it's just a man talking and talking, kind of like I'm doing now. I had to poke fun at myself, but yes, I just really, I think that like I really identify with the importance of the butch identity, and I see a lot of value and beauty in it, and it was all of those words just to express that sentiment.
Like, I think there's so much overlap and so much that the trans masculine identity and the butch lesbian identity share with each other that I feel like at some points it's like, why do we sever it so tightly, you know? There's a quote that I've been thinking about from Stone Bush Blues that was like, going on HRT, going on testosterone was like a coming home gift for my body. Even though the character decides to eventually go off of testosterone. And I felt like that is really significant of like, you know, I don't know. That was just something that came up, especially when thinking about how do we want to manifest how we're feeling internally. How do we go about that? You know, I don't know. I also feel like there's just something religious about being genderqueer. There's something about like, you know, trying to find out your true name, you know.
Well, and like the whole thing about Jesus, like not having like a human dad.
Yeah.
So his chromosomes.
Yes, I have
questionable.
Yeah.
100%. Yeah, and I think that homecoming, I think that is you expressed that really well. I think that's where I want to land with this as well, because I think maybe what I find so beautiful, inspiring, and important about the butch identity is because it is finding a home in something that is viewed as a contradiction. It's viewed as a contradiction to be a woman, but have like a masculine preference. It's viewed as a contradiction. And so to have a masculine presentation in a female body and a female experience of the world, that's, you know, that's like beautiful.
Yeah, and something that just, it feels like it makes sense because I've already been living as like butch and masculine for like years to like then find a home within the Catholic Church.
Yes.
Even though like, you know, this is something that I get like literally, I have this conversation like weekly, if not like twice a week, about like how and why. You know, how and why.
And it could be from either side, as the LGBTQ people and the Catholic people.
Yes, where it's like, isn't that a contradiction? Aren't you a living contradiction? And I've experienced this with my gender and sexual identity as well. Not to like plug myself, but I did create a comic that is on my Instagram, Kibbier, Kibyer, that kind of explains why I am Catholic and why I am queer and why I am both openly, and how that kind of ties into queerness.
Yes.
I don't know. I feel like that's the best way I can describe it.
That's a really good comic.
Thank you. It was actually like Marianne from Dignity USA, like, and Darby as well asked me to make it as a part of my internship this summer. I interned with Dignity USA over the summer, creating illustration and graphic design. But
yes, 100%. And I think the last thing I really want to say is just that the last piece, I think, is that butch identity, for example, butch lesbian identity, you can't really hide it. Like, if you are truly expressing it, I mean, you can have moments where you're more straight passing, but like being yourself is not as easy to hide. So I think ultimately, and I think that to me, we as the LGBTQ community are only as strong as our care for the most visible, aka the most easy targets to the outside members, you know? And I think that is what ties into the preferential option for the poor, like, or the vulnerable in general. Like, it's like, and I think that's what Jesus understood too. Like, all the stories of Jesus, like, definitely with the lepers, but also I'm thinking of the multiplication of the loaves and the fish. Like, he was talking to all these people, and a little boy had brought just some loaves and fish for him and his family or whatever. And Jesus used that to multiply. Like, Jesus understood whoever appears to be the weakest, whoever stands out the most as a target, those are the people that are like, in our care for those people, that is how we have the strongest and healthiest communities. Yeah. And I think that's important because it stands in such contrast to like the divisiveness of the current moment. Sorry, you go.
Oh, you're good. I think so often about the woman at the well.
Yes.
I see her, and I know this was also spoken about in Rome by Father Jim Martin during the prayer vigil of like, there is a way to read the woman at the well as kind of a surrogate of where the queer community stands, like politically, but also within the church, you know, of her being so outcast that she has to go through like the physical suffering of getting water at a well at the hottest time of the day. Right. And also the well was a place for women to meet and chat and, you know, get into the goss, you know, and she does not have that community.
Right.
But, you know, when she is so alone in the heat of the day, Jesus is there and talks to her and really sees her, you know. I think about her so often.
So as we land here at the end of our conversation, I again want to thank you. I really appreciate, you know, here I am just like lounging on my couch, holding my microphone. It's not my normal formal setup because my whole life with my computer has left me. But I really appreciate the professionalism that you came to this conversation with, like the preparedness. No, I really do. And everything that you have brought and contributed. And I just want to ask you, because I normally do at the end, and it's okay if you don't have anything, but I just always like to make sure, is there anything else? You know, we had a previous conversation, you know, offline before we did this recording. Is there anything else from there that you can think of that you wanted to bring in or touch on, or anything else that you feel moved to kind of end on now? And if not, again, totally fine, but I just want to give you the chance to like have the last word.
Yeah, I think something that I do want to mention is just, I feel like this has, you know, become a thread throughout our conversation tonight. Nothing is off limits to you spiritually. And also in terms of identity, like as a queer person, as somebody who might have been hurt by the church, as, you know, I feel like the target audience of this podcast.
Yes. That's the whiplash part.
Whiplash. Yeah. Nothing is truly in the way that God has treated you and the way that God has placed you on this planet. God wants you to have no limits when it comes to your self-exploration and to the exploration of your spirituality. You know,
yes.
There are things that seem untouchable and unmovable, but I promise you that God changes with you and God changes within each person, that there is nothing that is off limits if it is, you know, there's nothing off limits if it is done with, you know, real conviction and discernment. I'm using religious words right now. Bear with me.
You should. No, I think those things are, I think that understanding the full power of discernment as it really means, like, all these straight people say discernment, but then I'm like, I discerned that I'm trans, and they're like, no, not like that. Well, that's not how it works. Like that is a spiritual gift, and it does have fruit. So I think you're on the totally right track there.
If there's anything I learned from this experience at the LGBTQ pilgrimage, is that in the world that was intended for us as queer people and as people in general, there is no bar for entry. There should not be any bar for entry, and that is what we need to work towards. And that is what we need to continue to push for, both within ourselves, within our communities, within our society, and that Christ will be there with us.
This conversation is such a good reminder of how vital art is for our communities. For so many LGBTQ people, especially those of us shaped by faith traditions that rely on imagery, ritual, and beauty to express the sacred, art becomes a way to see ourselves reflected when words fall short. It's a space of creation and communion, where we can tell the truths that doctrine hasn't made room for yet. And behind so much of that sacred art across history are the hidden hands of queer artists and saints, people who poured their love, their longing, and their vision into the church's most beautiful works, even when their names or stories were never told or recorded. Remembering them helps us imagine what is possible. You can keep up with Libby's art on Instagram at KIBBYER, including her comic about why she's both queer and Catholic. It's a perfect example of how art can hold together faith, identity, and hope, and how creativity keeps the door open just a little bit wider for all of us. Thank you so much for joining us. Goodbye!